I am very sure that parents have to be excellent now because the world that their kids are growing up into requires excellent parenting.
I'm so excited to welcome John Fogel, a parenting researcher, dad of 4, and author of Punishment-Free Parenting, the brain-based way to raise kids without raising your voice. Love it. And the author of the new book, Set My Feelings Free, which is more directed to children.
When we see an adult out in public, either doing road rage or like whatever, most often we go, man, they're having a really hard day.
Yeah.
And when we see a kid out in public screaming or tantrum or whatever, we go, oh, they're really entitled.
Yes, I agree.
We hold fully developed brains to the standard of toddlers, and we hold toddlers to the standards of fully adult developed brains.
John, thank you so much for being here today. It's such an honor to finally connect with you via podcasting.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. It is an honor to be here. One clarification, I should say, the Set My Feelings Free, I am an author.
Oh, an author, yes.
Only author.
Yes, thank you.
My wife is also a co-author on that book, as well as I am not a co-illustrator. She illustrated the whole book. So
amazing.
We are co-creators, but I helped her write it, or we helped each other write it. There's one page that was all me, and that's at the back. We can talk about that later, but
oh my
but
gosh,
the rest of
thank
it
you
is
so
really
much. Well, you have to get your wife on. By the way, we are juggling schedules. He's on the show. Wifey's handling the kids. They're switching off. They're doing the parenting thing that all of us are very familiar with. And John, I was mentioning before we started this conversation right now that I love connecting with people on my Instagram via podcasting. It has been an incredible medium to network, and I just feel like I've gained these amazing friends across the space thanks to people who come on my show. So thank you for now being my new best friend on podcasting.
Yeah. And I think we scheduled this months ago, but it's fun to also just go back and forth. I think a lot of people don't realize that the healthy, like psychologically healthy parenting community, if that's a thing, like we're all very interconnected. I guess I shouldn't say all. There are those outliers. There's a couple of big creators who are like, I'm not going to, be involved with all these other people. But most of us don't do this whole like, oh, you should follow me and not this other person, and doing these, shots from the galley. Like so I've just enjoyed getting to know you and seeing your content come through and just nodding along and liking and resharing the stuff that I can.
Yeah, thank you. And feeling is mutual. Yeah, and we're talking today about punishment-free parenting. It's like a tongue twister, but also, your inspiration for writing this new book with your wife, Set My Feelings Free. So you wrote Punishment-Free Parenting to help adults rethink discipline and understand the emotional drivers behind behavior. And now you've co-written this book, Set My Feelings Free, that speaks directly to kids about feelings. What made you feel it was important to bring those emotional skills directly to children instead of only teaching them through parenting advice?
Well, what has become really clear on social media is that the videos that go viral, I mean, this could be a whole podcast about like how to do social media well, but the videos that go viral are the ones that give people quick fixes in their most difficult moments. And so time and time again, the stuff that I put out that's like, this is what to do when your kid's having a tantrum at the local grocery store or whatever, like that stuff comes out. But the truth is 90% of good discipline, 90% of, forgive me saying winning those moments, like really knowing and parenting within your values, is what you do the other 95% of your day, or maybe only 65% of your day if you have a really strong-willed kid who's just kind of going all over the place. But what I've found over and over is that parents who practice the tools outside of the kind of difficult moments are the ones that wind up being able to draw on those tools. And this just has to do, that's actually the basis of the book, Punishment-Free Parenting, is the reason I called it Punishment-Free Parenting, which is not actually a title that I love all the time, because I feel like it can alienate people, and they say, well, does that mean if I've punished my kids once, or if I plan to punish my kid again, that I'm not allowed to read this book, or that this guy's going to tell me that I'm a terrible parent or something like that? And the answer is absolutely not. The book is still absolutely for you. It's more about why punishment usually is ineffective, or why it works against the brain. And specifically, it's that when we are in a dysregulated state, when our nervous system is flooded, when we are in survival mode, if you've heard any of these different things, and this goes for adults and kids alike, it's really hard for us to learn. It's really hard because our brain actually turns off the regions of our brain that are for learning and for moral thinking and critical thought and long-term decision making, those parts of our brain kind of go dark. And then
Yeah.
the part of our brain that is designed for survival, just to kind of keep us alive, comes online. And what this means, and what I learned early in my parenting journey from actually becoming a licensed foster parent, was where I first heard it, is that if you punish a kid to teach them a lesson, you wind up turning off the part of their brain that learns.
Yeah.
And so often when people are saying, well, what do I do in the moment? What do I do in the moment? I really want to say, okay, well, here is this tool that you can use. And that's what Set My Feelings Free is. It's just tools that you can use in those dysregulating moments. But really, the tool is going to be 1,000 times more effective if you practice it not in those moments, because your kid is not going to learn in that moment how to implement that tool and come to self-discipline and self-regulation, which ultimately is the goal, right? Like, I don't want to you'd raise a kid who needs you to regulate all of their feelings for them all the time. They're never going to come to that unless you practice those tools outside of that setting. And so it is one thing to talk about it in punishment-free parenting, and really the first chapter even really mentions punishment in any sort of substantive way. The rest of the book is just how to, what to do instead. If you're not going to use punishment, here's all these other tools that you can have: boundary setting and, discipline consequences, and modeling proper behavior, and, teaching your kid how to navigate their emotions and repair when you get it wrong, and all of that stuff. And there's a step-by-step method at the end of punishment-free parenting that's phenomenal. It's the best part of the book. It's the part of my book that my wife helped me write. So it's unsurprising that it's the best part. She's brilliant. But that whole book is about what to do instead of punishment. At the same time, if that stays in the abstract, if parents never learn how to apply that in the moment, they're going to wind up going, oh, well, I don't want to punish my kid, but I don't know what else to do. I don't want to yell at my kid, but I find myself raising my voice at my kid every single day because, like, when I get into those moments, I don't know where to go.
Yeah.
And so we wrote Set My Feelings Free with the idea that, one, there's all these neuroscience tools, all these behavioral psychology tools that nobody is using with the kids. And I don't understand why. It just doesn't it's never made any sense to me why we don't use this stuff with kids. And then two, so that parents can have a book that they read, maybe it's once a week, maybe it's a couple times, some kids get obsessed with a book and they read it 5 times every single day for 2 weeks, whatever it is, where they can draw on these tools and then they can go through and when they have those big feelings, when they have those overwhelming moments, they can go, okay, what can I do instead of punching my little brother in the head? What can I do instead of throwing my cereal against the wall? What can I do instead of, melting down all over the place in the grocery store aisle? And yeah, that's why we did it.
I'm so excited about it. I can't wait for it to be a staple in our book rotation. Like you said, when my kids really start to love a book, it's coming out every night, and we're rereading it, and it's just so nice to have books like yours on the market, especially geared towards children, that are speaking to these values, speaking to, again, coping, things like that. Which I love what you mentioned about teaching and discipline. And I feel, and I think you feel the same, that sometimes people are afraid of the word discipline. They think it means punishment, when in reality, the root of discipline is teaching, right? We are teaching our kids how to behave and teaching our kids what is preferred or non-preferred behaviors.
Right.
And one of the most amazing things, which I don't think people may realize, is the person who wrote the foreword of your book, or I guess the intro, I don't know if it's the foreword or intro, is Tina Payne. The foreword is Tina Payne Bryson, who was the co-author of one of my favorite parenting books, which is The Whole Brain Child.
Yeah.
So how is that experience, obviously having her, how did that happen? I'm just curious, like, how was that connection? How was working with her to get that intro, the foreword done? That's an honor for you.
Yeah. No, it is an honor. So Tina and I have become friends. This is maybe a podcast exclusive. I'm actually really good friends with her husband now, which is
amazing.
which is kind of funny.
Love it.
I was texting him yesterday about the start of baseball season. But really how this all came together was that I asked, Tina liked some of the stuff that I had been putting out on social media, especially around, I think the early stuff that she was liking was about just validating kids' experiences and not gaslighting them when they have, a big feeling, just, saying, this isn't a real problem. Stop, thinking about this. And she had liked that stuff. And actually one of the things that you don't realize is that most of us do run our own accounts. So when Tina Payne Bryson likes something, like, it's actually Tina Payne Bryson liking that thing. Right. So we went back and forth a little bit, and I said, would you be on my podcast? And she said, I don't do a lot of podcasts, but maybe I'll make time for yours. And then after we did the podcast episode, we just connected so well. We talked for like 2 hours, and it just became clear our backgrounds were pretty similar, and our approaches are obviously very similar. And really, the book that I was writing is kind of an update of the Whole Brain Child.
Yeah.
It's almost a sequel where it's just like, here's everything that's in the Whole Brain Child, but like for 2025 years instead of, for 2012 years, because the world is very different than it was 13 years ago, 14 years ago when that book came out. And so eventually I had to like actually ask her to write the foreword. And I did something that like, I can't believe I did. I literally sent her voice notes. I was like, okay, you're my favorite parenting author. I mean, I swear to you, I should put out the voice notes. They're so embarrassing. I was like, you're my favorite author. You're my favorite parenting voice. Your book, The Whole Brain Child, was the first parenting book that I ever read. It's like, changed my life, right? Changed my life. And would you please, please, please consider writing the foreword to my book? I would be so honored. I don't know if you're ever going to like listen to this or get this, but I'm just like, please, please, please consider it. And I think I made them as like videos. Like I like sent her these, I texted her these videos of me asking her like a promposal. And she got back to me and she was like, I would be honored, but I don't forward books that I have not read every word of. And I don't know if it's going to fit into my schedule to read it. And if there's anything that I want you to change, you have to change it. Otherwise, I will not write the forward. I do not put my name on stuff. My name is not going to be on the cover of your book unless I agree with every single word of it. And I was like, that's a tall order in the world of parenting. Because like so she basically said, send me the PDF and I'll tell you if it's even worth changing what I need you to change. And she got the PDF and she read it like on a plane or something like that. And she emailed me back or texted me back and said, this is the first, I think she said, and maybe I'm misquoting her, I don't want to misquote her, but I think she said this is like the first book that I've ever forwarded where I haven't asked them to change anything.
Amazing.
That's how much I agree with all of this.
I love it.
And maybe she said maybe it's one of the only books or something.
Yeah.
But essentially, like, you nailed it all. And the reason that was so important to me, I'm getting my PhD in developmental psychology now, but I wasn't then. The reason that was so important to me is because peer review is really important to me.
Yeah.
I come from an academic background, just not in developmental psychology. And so peer review is very important to me. And this was kind of peer review in its own way. It was sending this to a peer who I don't even think of as a peer. I think of as a mentor, but she would consider, like people who write parenting books to be her peers, and sending it to a peer and saying, what do you think? And she came back and said, I think this is verifiable. I think it's locked in. And, credit to everybody who helped me along the way to get to that point. I have so many people on my list. If I ever get an award, that I'm going to just be standing up there listing people who, when I had early success on TikTok, who got with me and said, hey, John, you're getting this wrong. Like I have a guy over at he was a former dean of the Chicago School of Psychology who would just text me and be like, you're wrong about that. You should change that in this video.
Yeah.
And so having all those people in my corner to say like, it got me to that point where I could send her that manuscript and her go, yes. And then she wrote the foreword, and kind of the rest is history.
I love it. I think, we talked about how it's your first parenting book you read, my first parenting book, Whole Brain Child. I love that you said that you sort of updated it a little bit in terms of bringing it to modern parenting. I still think it's a wonderful book, as we both agree. And so I just think it's such an amazing story to see how that happened. And speaking of Whole Brain Child, so I loved it because, of course, I'm a neuroscience nerd, and they talk about, if for any listeners who haven't read the Whole Brain Child, I think it's useful, but it talks in a simple way how the brain works. So like the upstairs brain, the downstairs brain, left, right, integration, explaining why you can't explain logic in the middle of a meltdown is basically the take-home message that I got from the book, which obviously makes sense, and it inspired us, and we get it. So of course, all of those concepts can be very abstract, right? A lot of parenting books talk about neuroscience and emotional regulation, but when those start to feel abstract for families in everyday moments, it's hard to apply it. So how did you want to translate those bigger psychological ideas into tools, whether it's in Set My Feelings Free or whether it was in Punishment Free Parenting?
Yeah, well, so this is actually, I think, when I say some of our weaknesses are our greatest, advantages. There are greatest
Yeah.
unfair advantages. Like I said, I have an academic background, so I know how to do research. I know what peer review rigor looks like. I know how to cite things that, need to be cited. I know how to delve into all of these pieces. And this is like before AI. So like lots of
Yeah.
people think they know that now, but they just know how to punch it into a AI. But
Exactly.
I knew how to do
Yeah.
that, like go to the library even, right? But mostly online, right? Like to do like the journal searches and to
The Dewey Decimal System.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, to like really know
Yeah.
what you're doing. And so I knew the academic background, but I didn't have any of the foundational neuroanatomy. And so what was interesting is that I can apply it so simply to parents because I still remember what it is. Like, how many years did you go to medical school? And, undergrad, you're taking anatomy probably as a freshman, right? And like, for me, it was actually like, oh, this stuff happened recently. So I remember what it was to think I knew anything about the brain and know nothing. And so as I updated that knowledge and as I learned more from books like The Whole Brain Child, but also from like actual neuroscience textbooks and stuff, then all of a sudden I could go, oh, I'm not just like losing this in the abstraction. And my actual academic discipline is also in something very unique. So, well, it's actually not unique, but I think it's unique. I have a master's of divinity. So this
Mm,
means that I have basically a degree in ancient languages in the Bible.
mm.
And basically what you do as a pastor, if you care about scholarship, many don't, but if you actually care about scholarship, what you're doing on a week-to-week basis is you're going back to this thing that everybody thinks that they understand, that very few, if anyone, actually understands, that has enormous amounts of research written about it, and then somehow giving people a 25 to 35 minute TED talk
Mm.
about that material every single week. People who, again, think that they already know. So I don't talk about religion in any of my books at all, but actually it is the process of learning how to communicate with people who have deeply held beliefs that may be harming them, that
Yeah.
may be harming their kids, and helping them to see a more healthy version of that that actually allowed me to think in the terms that applying the neuroscience to people who don't know it at all. So if you can teach, a room full of 60-year-olds Hebrew that they've never understood, it's actually not that hard to teach, a room full of parents who want to know that, this is the part of your kid's brain that's active when they're throwing a tantrum. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a weird skill set, but I liken it to like I already translate impossibly complex things to adults all the time. So like this is not that different.
I love when you bring in lived experience into our parenting world and parenting advice. I used to be a resident assistant,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you know a part of being a resident assistant at one of the biggest institutions in the country, which is UCLA. Our on-campus housing was the largest of any public school. We had a huge on-campus housing, and I was also assistant resident director. And one thing I learned: conflict resolution. I
Yes.
learned healthy conflict resolution, and how much does that help in parenting, right? How much do those skills translate? So I love hearing when you can bring those skills that aren't necessarily parenting into the parenting realm to help other parents understand the importance. And along those lines, we one of the core ideas in your parenting work is that behavior is often a child communicating something they don't yet have the skills to regulate or express. And I
Right.
believe in this so strongly. And we could do a whole separate episode on educating parents on the why and the getting
Mhm.
curious behind behavior.
Mhm.
But in Set My Feelings Free, you introduce breathing, grounding, and movement tools to help kids process emotions. So, how does teaching those skills early change the way parents and children can handle big feelings? And if you want to just give like one example for a parent to be able to take home today, that might
Yeah.
tease the book a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy to give you as many examples as you want. Like the truth is there are so many different tools that you can use.
Yeah.
And just to your point before we get to that of the behavior communicating. I mean, this is literally when people ask me, okay, so you have chapter 1 is the problem with punishment. What's chapter 2? It's literally get curious, not furious. It's
Yeah.
how do we immediately pivot to curiosity about our kids' behaviors because they're almost always communicating a fundamental unmet need, right? And a lot of times we just assume that kids are giving us a hard time when really what we're experiencing is them just having a hard time in our
Yeah.
presence. So in Set My Feelings Free, we basically leverage 5 different psychological and uh, nervous system like integrations that you can do. So we have breathing as one of them, which is just stimulation of the vagus nerve, which then stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system to activate and can calm them down. That's lots of fancy terminology for when you get really upset, your body floods with adrenaline and cortisol, and you need the antidote to be flushed into your bloodstream through your adrenals. And the only way to do that, all of these are ways to do that, but one of the main ways you can do that is by breathing. Get into all the evolution behind it, but I think it's really interesting that breathing can have this profound impact. The problem is, take a deep breath almost never works for kids, right? So instead, that is the one tool in the book, the breathing tool, that we just lifted straight out of like the sphere of parenting advice that you see online. I didn't come up with it in any way, but it's the smelling, smell the candle or smell the rose, blow out the candle.
Yeah.
And so we just decided, okay, we're going to start with this one because it will get parents comfortable and it'll be familiar. And we want to start with familiarity. So we started with that one because so many people who are going to read this book are coming out of here's the truth. When you write a book, most of the early people who get that book and read it are people who are following you on social media and hearing the things that you're talking about. And so because of that, we were like, okay, they've heard this tool before. So breathing in to smell the rose, fill my body through my nose, let my breath go 1, 2, 3 through my mouth. I set it free. This is the thing. And by the way, when you said memorable, it's going to be added to your rotation. I'm so excited that it's going to be added to your rotation.
Oh,
but
me too.
It's also set to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You do not have to sing it, but we also know that music is a very, very strong mnemonic that people can use to memorize these things. And we want people to be able to draw on it in those moments. But if you're looking for one tool that I think is probably the most effective tool that we have in the book, I have only I guess I have 2 cognitive tools in the book, one for fear, but then one for cognitive sensory processing. And in that one, what we're having a kid do is when they're disappointed, they're going to look for colors around them and they're going to name those colors. And the reason why my first book had a rainbow brain on the front is because of the power of identifying colors in my own kids' lives as like a regulation tool. So it sounds crazy, but when my kids are really upset about something, we will literally play the color game anywhere where we are, where we'll go and say, okay, well, let's find something red. And we look around and go, okay, well, where's something red? And occasionally, kids don't always want to do this. Sometimes they push back and they go, I don't want to play the color game. And I say, okay, I'm going to play the color game by myself. This marker is red. And I'll hold up something blue and they'll say, that's not red, it's blue. Well, what I wanted their brain to do is identify a color, connect that to the word that is associated with that color, and create that fire that neural pathway. And in so doing, they actually start to integrate their brain back online and start to bring the parts of their brain back online that are kind of needing to be brought back online. And so just simple things like that, those simple tools that you can leverage can like totally transform it. So in the book, it's a girl who wants to go outside. It's clearly she thinks she's going to have a pool day or a beach day. She's got, her swimsuit on. She's got her beach ball under her arm. She's got her towel under her arm. She's ready to go outside and there's just sheets of rain. And she plays the color game as a way to move through and navigate. And that actually opens up, the next page opens up to a page, my favorite page in the book. It's a spread of all of these this living room where you can go through and find all the colors, but you can also find like a bunch of hidden items that my wife has hidden away. There's a pangolin in the shape of a pillow that if you know it's there, you can look for it. And the idea here is just that searching and doing that identifying of colors can be incredibly regulating and integrating for parents. And I can't tell you, like literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have learned that tool, not from the book, but from other videos that I've made and have told me like this changed my life. So
They're like little brain hacks, right? I mean, like how we
100%.
get our brains back online. I love how the way you describe that, because when parents can understand that a dysregulated brain is not working online, like we said, right? It's
Right.
flooded, and there's a lot of hormones, and there's a lot of stress there that we're trying to ground them. And this is sort of a grounding exercise, and I love it. I will be singing it to the tune of you said "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star,"
Twinkle,
right?
twinkle, little star.
I
Yeah.
will. I'm all in. I love singing to my kids. I'm not a world-class singer, but you don't have to be,
You do
and I
not.
love it. I love when books can connect music, like you said, so don't worry, I will be one of those people reading and singing along at the same time. And I think, going back to your point, like, you're talking about these really great examples, right? So we have the song to the about taking a deep breath, but also this color game. And
Right.
your advice to families when they're using this is obviously using it when they're not so dysregulated, correct? Or
Right.
what would be that advice on when you would incorporate this for a family?
Well, I mean, I think you want to do all of these things, all
Yeah.
of the different what I call emotional regulation games. You want to play the emotional regulation games when they are not dysregulated initially.
Yeah.
And then you can bring them in those difficult moments. And
Love it.
because they've been repeated, hopefully a bunch of times, but at least a couple times, your kid has much more capacity to be able to grab onto that and use it. And so, I mean, I hope that parents use these tools outside of dysregulation.
Mhm.
First thing in the morning, after, at bed, right before bed, they go to sleep. But ultimately, when this book is going to pay for itself in spades is when the parent is at the grocery store and the kid's having a meltdown about wanting to get chocolate covered sugar marshmallow bombs.
Yeah.
And, they're up on the highest shelf and the kid is just laying on the floor, kicking and screaming. And we've all been there. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that my kids don't do that. They do that. Absolutely. The difference is I have these tools that then I can leverage and use in those moments. My kids know the tools, and these are just the beginning. The interesting thing is the last page before the end of the book. My wife did these beautiful end pages too. But the last page before the end pages of the book is the page that's written by me, and I tell you how each of the tools work. It's for adults. You don't have to read it to your kid. Although you can. Some kids, like my 9-year-old, loves reading that page because he loves learning about it.
Yeah.
But you can learn how the tools work so that you can make up your own tools. And you actually, like, the funny thing about this is, I mean, you've, I'm sure, encountered a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy in your work, going through in the medical field. All of these tools come from different disciplines of psychology. I actually didn't make any of them up. I just couldn't believe that they weren't being used with kids.
Right.
Like, the color game is just like telling a person who's having a panic attack to identify things in the room with them and name their color has been a tool that we've had for 30 years. Why aren't we doing that with toddlers? Like, I have never understood why we don't use those like diaphragmatic breathing, which is that
Yeah.
vagal stimulation breathing. Like, we've known for years that this is a way to help adults navigate through anxiety, but we don't do it with kids. And it's because I think oftentimes we view the reasons that kids are melting down and we go, these aren't real reasons to be upset. And we don't have the same perspective and empathy to go, oh, whether or not this is a legitimate reason to be throwing a tantrum right now is irrelevant. The point is, the child's brain in an fMRI machine would look exactly like that adult having a panic attack. And so I look at that and I go, okay, like, what is the symptom management here? And the symptom management is these tools. And so that's why I wrote the book. It's, again, I didn't come up with any of this stuff. I just applied it to kids.
And I appreciate that. And also testament to you. I love when I talk to fellow creators that give credit where it's due. I do the same thing. Like when as I'm writing my own book too, I'm like, as I'm sourcing information and coming up with my own words and coming up with all the people who've inspired me before me, trying to give credit to that, right? Like you're like, hey, look,
Absolutely.
this is there, but here is what I noticed was lacking. And same thing when I'm writing my book about limits and boundaries. I'm looking, the literature has always been there, but how have
Mhm.
we not explained it in this certain way and how we're going to take that? And I love that you're doing that for children. And parents often hear advice about helping kids regulate emotions, but the real test comes in those chaotic moments. You mentioned the grocery store meltdown a few times. You've done videos on that as well. The bedtime protest, the sibling fight. What does it actually look like for a parent to use these ideas from whether it's your first book or Set My
Mhm.
Feelings Free in the middle of a real emotional moment? Like, what do you hope that they can remember from all of the stuff they
Yeah.
listen to or read on a page?
Yeah. I think if you could take away one thing from this episode, it's in those moments, first, do no harm. It's so hard to parent during those moments. Your trauma comes back online. The way that your parents, what they did to you. And again, it sounds like I'm saying that capital T trauma, what they did to you. No, I'm just saying
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
way in which your parents navigated your big feelings. One of the coolest parts of punishment free parenting is one of the last parts I wrote. I went back into I tried to keep history out of punishment free parenting because if I was going to write a history book, it's all I would write. I love history.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help going back to the mid 1930s and 40s when a lot of our parents were being indoctrinated into how to parent effectively,
Mhm.
right? Many of our baby boomer parents had parents who were around and they were kids in the 30s and 40s. They were like, Depression era kids, the greatest generation types. And the prevailing advice for parents at that point was show no affection to your kids.
Mhm.
Do not pick them up. Do not, and it was because of a misunderstanding of germ theory. They thought that any contact with a child is more likely to get them sick.
Mm.
So, like, don't ever pick kids up. Don't touch them. Psychologically, they'll be fine if you totally ignore them 99% of the day because they'll adapt. And you really can't hurt kids that badly. And the same people who are coming up with this advice were actively doing things to kids that they would never recover from. I mean, it's
Yeah.
horrendous. Like you have the little Albert experiment where um, this guy John Walton convinced or classically conditioned this little kid to be terrified of this rat, this white rat, and then never deconditioned him. The kid just like was ruined for his whole life because they terrified him of this rat over for no reason, just to prove that they could. And this is the guy who was writing pamphlets. Literally, he was the guy who was writing pamphlets to send home with new moms in the hospital. And so it's hard because so many of us are still deeply impacted by the fact that that's the world that our parents grew up into. I've talked to people who say, my mom never hugged me until the day I left for college.
Yeah.
Right. And when you appreciate that, like, this is the hand that they were dealt, I think you can have some empathy and some understanding and realize that maybe their inability to navigate your big feelings was about them as much as it was about you, right? Like it was more them. They were just trying to survive. That being said, all of us are impacted by that relationship. All of us, this is one of the only things that Freud got right. All of us were deeply impacted by the relationship that we had with our primary caregivers.
Yeah.
And so when we then get in these moments and our kid is screaming or melting down, I can give you all the scripts in the world. I can give you all the tools in the world. I can give you all these pieces. But unless you can consciously pause before you fly off and go into that place, like none of it's going to be impactful
Yeah.
because your child may be dealing with a dysregulated brain right at that moment, but you are too. And so, the biggest thing is like when you feel the heat, you take a beat. Like if you feel yourself get into that place, just pause. Like no harm is going to come, or far less harm, I should say, is going to come from you pausing for 30 seconds before you flip your lid than from you feeling like I have to do this or that and the other. And I guess the second takeaway then would be, hey, you know what? You also don't have to, like, not everything is requiring of your reaction or response.
Yeah.
Kids learn so much through their own navigating of the world. And do nothing parenting is actually a lot better than a lot of people want to make it out to be.
Mhm.
The parents who stay back at the park and let the kid fall off the slide, research increasingly shows us those kids wind up with better outcomes than the parent who's hovering constantly and catching them every single time they stumble.
Yeah.
And so I recently recorded a podcast episode of my podcast about that. I wrote about that in my book. Obviously, Jonathan Haidt wrote about that in his book, The Anxious Generation. But, it's all these different things. If you can just feel the heat and take a beat, number one, and number two, realize that sometimes the most effective parenting that you're going to do is nothing at all, then all of a sudden, all of the tools on the page in Set My Feelings Free are going to pop out, because now you know what you need when you need it. And that becomes the ultimate tool, the discernment to know when these tools are necessary. And then they're going to pull your kids out. And I just walked out of Panera today, and some, I want to say baby boomer probably, was walking out with me and said, I just want you to know your boys are like the most well-behaved kids I've ever seen. And I was like, I didn't know how to respond, because I was like, yeah, I mean, I navigated the food not getting to us very quickly, and they were annoyed by that by playing a game with them.
Yeah.
I navigated not having the food that one of my kids wanted by adjusting on the fly and getting something else. I navigated the soup being too hot by like counting down backwards from 50, like one at us at a time. Like I navigated all these things, and her reaction was, oh, your kids are well behaved. When in reality, like, I don't want to be this guy, but like, yeah, because they every time that they were navigating something hard for the last many years of their life, we've done
Yeah.
these things. And now they know, okay, here's what I can do. And in one of those cases, I wasn't the one leading it. My 9-year-old was.
Mm.
So that's the other thing, is that like they learn this stuff. And it's funny, because one of my very early videos was about using one of these tools in that same Panera.
I love that. And it's so I'm curious your thoughts. So whenever someone compliments me on my kids' behavior, meaning, wow, your kids are like on airplanes, like your kids are the
Sure.
most well behaved on an
Oh
airplane.
man, I
Your
hate that.
kids are so polite. Your kids,
Uh-huh.
I get it now. And I want to be clear. My son is 6, my daughter is 3 at the time of this recording. Now, I have mixed feelings, because I also know as a mother that we have had to have those moments where they're not behaving as I want
Mhm.
them to. So I can teach them how to behave in these situations, or what is
Right.
preferred behavior. So then my thought always goes to, so then if you think that I'm doing a great job now, what were you thinking if you saw me 2 years ago when my 4-year-old was having a meltdown in the middle of the store because he couldn't get what he wanted, but I led him through that? Like,
Right.
what would your thoughts would have been then? It's just an interesting
It
concept to
is.
me, because like they're of course telling you that because they saw something good, but what if your kids, because I'm sure your kids have been just like my kids,
Oh
that
yeah.
in order to get them to be like that, right? We had to go through the trenches of like
Absolutely.
teaching them. So like then I'm like, do you know that there was this is all by design. Like I
Right.
had to teach my kids how to
Right.
get to this level at 9
Right.
years of age, 6 years of age, that I will do these tools, but yeah, now they understand that there's limits to when we go to a restaurant, that they're not going to throw food. But 5 years
Right.
ago, I was
Right.
in the trenches, just like most of other. I'm curious your thoughts on that
Yeah.
perspective of like the compliment, but also would you have said the same thing if my kids were not behaving in your eyes?
So the thing that I try and remember
Yeah.
is when my kid's melting down in the grocery store, and I think this is in punishment for parenting, but when my kid's melting down in the grocery store, there is a strong urge for me to say, all these people are judging me for being a bad parent in
Yes.
this moment, right? When in reality, the truth is half the people don't even notice, because
Mhm.
they're in their phone or they're in their
Yeah.
own little world. So like they don't notice. Then the other 49% of people are just so glad that it's not them.
Right.
Like they're so glad that it's not their kid. They're so glad that their kids are 20 now or 30 or whatever, or they never had kids maybe. Like, and then 1% of people are judging you. And that 1%, it was never about you.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
and that's the thing that I try and remember, because it can feel very like you can feel like you're parenting in front of a crowd. I think when people come up to you and say like your kids are really well behaved or they're whatever, I think that they're trying to pay you a compliment. But I think that those same people probably wouldn't be like, you were a bad parent if your kids like here's like the really frustrating part for me is that actually when my kids behave well, I'm praised. But when my kids behave poorly, they're shamed.
Mhm.
Like actually most adults have so much empathy for other adults,
Yeah.
even parents, unless you as a parent are doing something that's overtly like just triggering to them. Like their kids screaming and you're just like going, here's another lollipop and here's another, like something that like they really like some older generation is just like, that's bad parenting. Like unless you're doing something that's like that, which 99% of the time we're not doing those things. Like we're just trying to navigate the emotion in the moment. We're actually getting the benefit of the doubt for most of the people out in public. The problem is as a society, we hold kids. I've said this 1,000 times. I'll say it one more. Like when we see an adult out in public, either doing road rage or like whatever, most often we go, man, that they're having a really hard day.
Yeah.
And when we see a kid out in public screaming or tantruming or whatever, we go, oh, they're really entitled.
Yes, I
We
agree.
hold
Mhm.
fully developed brains to the standard of toddlers, and we hold toddlers to the standards of fully adult developed brains.
Yeah.
And so I look at those moments and I go, well, I'm glad, like I always look at those moments as teaching tools to say to that lady, just to go like, yeah, well, we love working together or something like that. Like, oh, like it's all, or I'll say it's all them. It's all them. Because I want to remind those people that like kids do well when they can.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I said that exactly in punishment-free parenting, but that's a Dr. Ross Green concept. Kids will do as well as they can. And I think so often we don't remember that.
I agree with what you said about the holding standards. I think I've done a post about that too, and it's so true. I mean, I love what you said also that we get the kudos if they're behaving well, and then when they are not behaving well, the kid gets a shame. There's also shame for the parents, like, oh, they don't know how to control their kid. But I love the way you framed how to handle judgment because I think we all have been there. I mean, I, as a pediatrician, someone who loves parenting, my son, he is an amazing 6-year-old, but he has had the most intense meltdowns compared to my daughter. When I look back now, I'm like, oh shit, my daughter's actually a really easy kid. I put that in quotes,
Comparatively, right.
comparatively, right? Because my son, I didn't know anything different. I just thought that this is what it was, that I'm going to have a kid with big feelings and meltdowns galore, and I'm just going to continue doing the things that I did. And it's so important to remember that when those eyes are on you, that the 1% that is probably judging you, what is the point? Like they really have no value in your life. They're not important to you. And if they are, because we've gotten often a message talking about judgment, we've often gotten judged by our son's behavior by family members. Like, you guys don't know how to handle, you need to be more strict with him. You need to punish him. And we never dealt with corporal punishment with our son, that we didn't do timeouts with our son from a personal perspective. I felt like he didn't need that. And, I told my family, I'm like, I need you just to believe in us.
Right.
He understands. He's just a big feeling kid. And lo and behold, 6-year-old now is able, with the tools, kind of what you mentioned. Now you have placed it beautifully in a book, how to handle those big feelings when they come, how to regulate in those moments. But that took all the time that we had in the last 6 years,
Absolutely.
and it will continue to happen. Like, it's
Yes.
not done. Parenting doesn't end when your kid turns 6 years old or when your kid turns 18. It's a lifelong game that I think so many parents forget that they're in and that they signed
Yeah.
up for. Yeah.
No, and the world is also just way not set up for kids.
Yes.
And
Especially in America. I went to Spain,
especially
by
in
the
the United
way.
States.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Spain is so child friendly. And I was like telling my husband, I'm like, this is why American parents are so stressed, because
Mhm.
our society just doesn't support kids. Like,
Yeah, and
be
and
kids.
and
Yeah.
and as the world moves like this is a lot of what I'm seeing
Yeah.
doing like getting the PhD right now, is that so much of the research that's coming out right now, right? Like that's the stuff that I'm writing papers about because like I'm in the midst of it. And like it's never been harder for kids to like find their way through this world, which is so incredibly insane for me to say, again, as a history nerd, to
Yeah.
go, oh well, but what about slavery, what about the Holocaust, what about this? Well, actually, like this sounds absolutely out of left field, but like capital T trauma, actually kids are almost built to be able to regulate that and figure it out with supportive help,
Yeah.
versus like the, and I don't want to like demonize screens, but like the use of screens to navigate every single emotion that a child
Right.
has,
You
right?
know
To
how I
like
feel about that
avoid,
too.
right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
avoid like any feeling that a kid has just by shoving a tablet in front of them.
Right.
Like there's no neural wiring to get through that. the way in which schools today have increasingly cut funding for the arts, cut funding for physical education, reduced the amount of time that kids spend in independent play and peer-based play in school in service of trying to, meet some sort of academic standard, like class sizes being what they are in comparison, right? Like all of these things, even during like the baby boomer generation, we had, all these schools are popping up all over the place because we don't know where to put all these kids. Like they still had smaller class sizes, first of all, than we do today. Their teachers were proportionally paid much better than ours are today. And they had basically 50% of their time was independent learning.
Yeah.
Now, when we look at our kids, we go, oh, well, like the number of kids that I experience just anecdotally who they're struggling, they're highly sensitive, they're ADHD, they're, diagnosed ODD, PDA, whatever. And a lot of that stuff doesn't appear at 2 and 3 and 4 and then all of a sudden, or it's there, but like the parents are managing it. And then they wind up in some sort of traditional environment. And then all of a sudden, like it just flies off. When I look at that, I go, like, we're just setting people up to fail. Like we're just setting kids up to fail. And that's not on teachers. Like teachers are actually the ones who are experiencing this the worst. Like they're experiencing the greatest symptomatic results of this. But literally like all of the things of modernity that are causing, and AI is going to have a big impact on this.
Yeah.
And like social media has already had a big impact. Like I look at this and I go, the reason why punishment-free parenting needed to be written now is not like I hold parents to an extremely high standard, but I try and be incredibly gracious and say like, hey, I'm right with you. I struggle too, but here's the best possible way to parent. Like the reason why I navigate that is because I am very sure that parents have to be excellent now because the world that their kids are growing up into requires excellent parenting, which is it's not fair. And as my dad used to say, life isn't fair. Yeah. But we are all raising kids at maybe one of the hardest times in human history to raise kids. Maybe the hardest time in human history to raise kids. We don't know what they're going into the world for. And that's why it requires excellent parenting and all of these emotional regulation tools to be able to do that. And yes, we also need to become more kid-friendly as a society while doing that.
I could not agree more. And, I talk about this sort of belief in like passive parenting versus active parenting. So I don't talk about the way we discipline, but in terms of like active parenting is not helicopter parenting. It's actually with intention, right? It's like wanting to change with your child, to learn about them, to connect, to actually really treat this as the most important role you will do in this world if you are a parent. Like, it doesn't mean that everyone has to be a parent. What I'm saying is that if you choose or have been in the circumstance that now you have to raise a child, it is a role that really matters. And I see this from a developmental standpoint, a health standpoint. I understand, like you, very well that it's not easy to raise a kid, but I know, and I remember when I held my son and he had a stroke and a seizure and he was born, and I turned to my husband, I'm like, this is our son. Like, whatever happens, we have to take care of him. Like, this is our kid. Like, I don't know what the future is going to hold. And for us, thankfully, he is doing great. He's neurodiverse and, he has sensory issues, but that's okay. Like we're navigating that, right? Like everything in parenting is a navigation. And it's not to say that we shut down our feelings and say, oh, but you can't say it's hard, because I know it's hard. Like, but it is something that we have to take with intention. And I wish more parents would understand that intention is not hard work. It's not like extra time. It's like you are teaching so beautifully. It's how you reframe your brain to get curious. It's how you teach your kid in those little moments. Rather than yelling at them that they're waiting for their food, I'm going to bring some levity and play a little game with my kid and do a countdown together. And it's all those little moments where they're going to grow up and they're now going to be part of a society that now is more regulated, because that's our job. I want to raise people that won't start wars, that will learn how to conflict resolute and who have emotional regulation. Like those all were people that weren't parented well,
Yeah. I mean, well, I'm going to tell you 2 secrets. Can I tell you 2 secrets?
I love secrets.
You love secrets. Okay. I think
and now like thousands of people are going to be in our secret. Okay.
Okay. They're going to hear it. Okay. First thing. People ask me all the time how I made the move from like religion and like cognitive sciences of religion. So when I say religion, I'm not I don't come from like a fundamentalistic tradition where I'm, oh, my way is right and everybody else is wrong. Like I come from like a cognitive sciences of religion, like, oh, this is how people work through their stuff, right? And this is, I'm ecumenical. I used to work as a chaplain at a hospital where I counseled Hindu patients and Buddhist patients and Muslim patients and Jewish patients and Christian patients and atheists and like all of them, right? So like that, people ask me a lot, why? And I said, because when I was growing up, I saw religion as a tool to make a better world.
Yeah.
I saw this as like, oh, and I think all of us to some extent say like, oh, well, like this is a way for the world to be better if people followed, in my case, it was the teachings of Jesus, right? Like if you could follow the teachings of Jesus, the world would be better. What I realized about 5 years ago, as I was going through a lot of this stuff with my own kids, and I was learning, I had a really strong-willed, probably neurodiverse, sensory overload kid. He's 9 now. He's
Yeah.
thriving. But
Yeah.
but as I was going through that myself, that was also coinciding with me realizing, oh, actually, it's really hard to change adults. It's better if we just do a good job of instilling empathy and emotional regulation when they're kids. Like I took the long game, which is a very not American thing to do. Americans, we're on a 4-year election cycle, so we are always just trying to fix things in the next 3 years. I took the long game, which is a more like East Asian perspective of like, okay, if we're going to solve this problem, let's solve it for the next 50 years.
Right.
Like, and I went, oh, the more kids that can learn empathy and perspective taking and emotional regulation and conflict transformation and self confidence, like then the world will just be a better place. And so that's my first secret, is that when people ask me how I got into this, it's like, well, I had all these tools and I was a licensed foster parent and I had the counseling background and I had all this stuff, right? Like I had what I needed and the practical experience of raising a kid who was challenging. But really the big shift in my mind was realizing, oh, changing adults is hard.
Yeah.
If you really want to fix the world, you gotta, as Michael Jackson said, you gotta start with the kids.
Exactly.
Right? That's secret 1.
Yeah.
Secret 2 is that I actually think that the world itself would be a infinitely better place if every single person could just learn the fundamental tenet of humility. And the thing that I think great parenting teaches you is humility. And this is why I used to think like my kids, like, so I'll give you the Panera example again, right? So like we're out and we're like doing all this stuff. People will often ask me, they'll say like, oh, so how do you know to do all that stuff? 1, because I learned how to listen to my kids. I learned what each kid needed. And it meant that I couldn't decide ahead of time what they needed. I had to be able to approach it with humility and go, whatever. 2, people go, well, that's really hard. Everything you were doing there is really hard. No, actually, I stopped saying that parenting is the hardest thing that we'll ever do. I used to say this all the time on my account. I used to say, parenting is the most important and hardest thing that you're ever going to do. And I stopped saying that. I still say it's the most important thing that most of us will ever do. But I've stopped saying it's the hardest, because the truth is when you actually apply these tools, and you're going to see this, Dr. Mona, you're going to see this as your kid goes from 6 to 9. It was actually, okay, you brought up Tina, that first podcast episode with her. I asked her a question. I said, so is it hard to raise teenagers? Her kids are all like 20s and above now. I said, is it hard to raise? I think she has a 19-year-old. Says, is it hard to raise teenagers? And she goes, oh yeah, each challenge, each thing comes with its own, each stage comes with its own challenges, blah, blah, blah. And I said, get real. I said, get serious with me. After all you did when they were toddlers, your kids were harder as teenagers? And she said, absolutely not. She goes, actually, parenting teenagers is a breeze. It's easy. Parenting middle schoolers is easy. Because if you do the work when they're 4, your kids trust you, your kids come to you with their stuff, your kids navigate. And so here's my good news to you. My 18-month-old, my daughter, she is probably the most challenging 18-month-old that I've ever had. I have all the humility in the world to go, I don't know what you need yet, and I'm going to figure it out with you, right? My 4-year-old is in some ways the second most challenging 4-year-old I've ever had compared to my oldest. My 9-year-old is a breeze. This kid is easy. This kid is the kid who was like, we don't know if this kid's gonna be able to, like in my mind, I'm going like, is
Right.
this kid gonna be able to go to kindergarten? Like, he's gonna be a terror for his teachers. Like, he scrapes his knee and he cries for 2 hours. Like, oh, he won't ever go down the slide. There's a slide at the water park. He'll never go down it because he's too afraid. This kid is rugged. He's rough and tumble. He goes to an outdoor school where he's in the sub-zero temperatures and he just doesn't complain about it, just does it. He starts fires in our backyard. He carries a knife with him everywhere he goes. This is not a kid who you would ever think is like,
Yeah.
oh, highly sensitive, oh, neuro this, that, and the other. No. And it's not that I'm neurodiverse. Like, I'm super ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 11. My wife maybe as well. But like, those things are benefits when you actually raise a kid to know themselves.
Yeah.
Those things become their greatest strengths. And so I've stopped saying the parenting is hard, because I go, there are moments that are hard, but actually at Panera, that was easy.
Right.
It was so much easier than my kids screaming for the whole time. It was so much easier than my kids losing their temper over every single thing. Then we
Yeah.
went to Home Depot after that. My kids followed me through the store. We got what we needed to go. We went out, walked out the door. They said, can I have a lollipop? I said, not today. They said, okay. They put them back and we walked out. Like, easy.
I know, but that's the
Easy
work you put
parenting.
in, right?
But it took a
Yeah.
ton of time to
I
get
know.
there.
I
So you're going to get there. You're
Yeah.
already there. I don't want
Yeah.
to be patronizing. You're already there. But you're going to see as your 6-year-old becomes 7, 8, 9, because I remember when my oldest was 6 and it was just getting easier. What you're going to see in 3 years from now, when your book is out and the world is celebrating you and you're a New York Times bestseller and everybody's
Oh,
flocking
thank
to
you.
get your
Yeah.
signature. And I'm just like, yeah, I know her. What you're going to remember then is this conversation. You're going to go, oh my gosh, wait, John was right.
Yeah,
Actually,
you're so
parenting is not the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's the most fun, easiest thing in the world if you actually do it the right way.
Oh, I love that. It's true. You're right. I mean, it is impactful. And I think when you're in that trenches, especially for a lot of parents listening in those first 4 to 5 years, which are notoriously thought to be the hardest, but like we just discussed, every phase can be hard. But to the point you mentioned about Tina, that when you have the foundations and listen, if you're listening to this and your kid is 8, it is not too late to start build
Absolutely
foundations,
not.
right? Like that's the point, is that when you understand that there's foundations to be built, when you understand there's a reason to start to get curious versus to start attacking your kid, when you realize that you are one part of the equation of a power struggle, like you will learn to step back a little bit and say, what does my kid need? And I really love that you mentioned learning to know your kid individually, because so much of what I think gets lost is that individuality. The fact that my son needed a different level of attunement and a different level of interaction during his meltdowns. My daughter needs way more comfort. My son needed a little more isolation. And I know that now. Like, it wasn't that I just left him alone, it's that he needed, when you got near him, he would just get more upset, when you just needed to just stay close and stay calm and say less. Right. And my
Mm-hmm.
daughter
Mm-hmm.
needs all the words in the world. It's
Mm-hmm.
so different. But
Totally
for
different.
you, I mean, I think me and you could like talk about parenting forever, and maybe we should have our own little podcast, John. But for now, since we both
I'm going
have
to have
our
to
own
get you on
podcast
mine.
going, when you step back and look at both of your books together, right? They
Yeah.
seem to share the same goal of helping families build emotional awareness, regulation, emotional understanding. If
Yes.
parents consistently apply these ideas at home, what do you think their lives would look like in 5 to 10 years? Like, what is your dream for them?
I think it's beyond 5 to 10 years, actually.
Yeah.
I think I like to zoom out and go, like, if you're just trying to make it to 18,
Hmm.
like, that's such a small view of your kid's life.
Yeah.
I think at 18, you might not have if you do everything that I say, your kid might not get straight A's.
Hmm.
If you do everything that I say, your kid will probably still have a lot of pretty bad emotional breakups with people in their life. They might not choose the college that you want because they're not going to be blindly obedient. They might not do all of those things. I think what's more interesting is, what do I think that your life will be like when they're 30? And what do I think their life will be like when they're 30? And I think if we start from that goal of going, how do I want my kid to live from 30 to 80?
Yeah.
To live the better 2/3 of their life. How do I want them to live then? I think they'll be good at repair.
Yeah.
I think that they'll be able to regulate their own emotions. I think that they'll be self-confident, be able to navigate the challenges of the world. And absolutely, we got to get them there. But I think actually the real fruit comes out when you look at the long term. And I think if you want to look at your life 5 to 10 years from now, I promise you, if you do the stuff that I'm talking about, your whole life is going to feel a lot less complicated and a lot less fights and a lot less screaming. And I think that you're gonna have a great time, because parenting is my favorite thing that I do, and I do a lot of stuff that's really fun.
John, it is such a light talking to you. Like I said, I love reminding parents to parent with intention, and that should not be scary. That should be empowering, that you have this great role that you're doing. And it's just very obvious that all of the education you do, your books that you've written, obviously this new children's book, Set Your Feelings Free, is all led with that intention. That final question just embodied that, right? Like, this is a lifelong experience, and we want to raise children that love themselves and know who they are. And you weave that in many times. You talked about the identity of your kid and their self, who they are. And like, that is such an important philosophy for me, because again, we're not just managing tantrums here. Like, I think so many times parents think like, I need to fix the solution now, which I totally respect. Like, my kid's not eating, my kid's not doing this, but you and I are both encouraging parents to sort of zoom out and think about that value of what they're raising their kids with. And that is why this is why we give the advice that we do. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I need to know, because everyone's going to be asking me, but you have to tell everyone, where can they go to stay connected? Where can they go to get your book? Not only Punishment-Free Parenting, but also Set Your Feelings Free, or Set My Feelings Free.
Set
right?
My Feelings
Set
Free.
My Feelings Free.
Buy my books wherever books are sold. Doesn't matter to me. I just want you to get them in your hands. Set My Feelings Free comes out on April 28th of this year, 2026. My book came out last year, so it's available everywhere. You can also get the audiobook for my book. I read it. I think I'm pretty good at that. I think I like how I sound.
You have a good podcast voice. So
I got a good voice for that. I really appreciated being able to do that. And then you can find me at Whole Parent everywhere, and check out my podcast. You can check out, I have a membership with a ton of courses that you can be a part of. Yeah. Find me online and say, hey, I came from the Dr. Mona podcast, and we'll connect.
I love it. Yes, please do what he said. The most important thing for the show is, remember, if you like these episodes, you have to hit that thumbs up sign, comment on what you took home. And if you read the book already, whether it's Set My Feelings Free or whether it's Punishment-Free Parenting, write what you took home, what your child took home, if they read the kids' book, because we really want to hear from you. And remember to subscribe to the show and share this episode wherever you can, so we can spread this message and spread the word with more caregivers and parents around the globe. Thank you again. And I cannot wait to connect with John again in the future and chat with more amazing guests in the future on the show.